So there's a common objection that goes around by Muslims, anti-Trinitarians, that I want to address. Of course, we've done many talks on this, but just in a brief rebuttal, is this mistaken objection, this objection based on dialectics, which is that how could Jesus be the Son of God if he died, because God can't die? And this is a mistake on the basis of words, and a metaphysical mistake as well. The word God can pick out different things, and we don't just predicate or say one type of thing about God. For example, we don't just say that God is one person, right? We don't just say that God possesses divine power or divine energy. We say all of those things about God. So the phrase God can pick out a person, right? The person of the Son, the person of the Father, the person of the Spirit, all three are God. Or God can pick out the common divine nature or power that all three persons share, right? So divinity, right, can be predicated of the common nature or of any individual person in terms of the Trinity. So it's a mistake of words in this regard, and this is why Chalcedon, the teaching of Chalcedon, is so important in terms of Christ's death. So when we speak of Christ dying on the cross, the reason that we maintain the importance and the maintenance of the particular properties of both of his natures, his human nature and his divine nature, is partly to explain how this is possible. So the divine subject is the person of the Son, right? And that person possesses a divine nature as well as a human nature. So he, as the subject, really does undergo death, but the death that he undergoes occurs via the severance of his human soul from his human body. So the divine nature is not being destroyed, the divine nature is not being changed, the divine nature is not undergoing any disturbance or alteration. We say with John Damascus in book 3 of Defense of the Orthodox Faith, on the Orthodox Faith, that the divine nature is impassible, meaning that it's not subject to change and alteration in itself. And so when he describes at the end of that chapter the death of Christ, the end of book 3, the last few chapters, he explains that the death occurs in the sense that the human soul is severed from the human body. But the subject of both the human soul and the human body, the only subject of that human nature, is the divine person of the Logos. So that's how it's possible for God to be unchanging, but also to experience death in his human nature. And this is why the Diophysite formula of Chalcedon, and that means the two natures, is still so important for our theology. That's why the fifth and sixth councils reaffirm this. The fifth council reaffirming that the only subject is the second person of the Godhead, the Logos. And the sixth council reaffirming that he still possesses both a human will and a human nature because he possesses, a human will and human energy because he possesses a human nature. That's why the Bible in the New Testament texts, and the Old as well, in many, many places says both things, right? There's not just verses that say that Jesus is, strictly speaking, only God or merely God. There's not just verses that say he's, strictly speaking, only human or merely human. He is the Son of Man and he's the Son of God. He's both of those things at the same time. And he's both of those things at the same time because of the Incarnation, right? What does Philippians say? Philippians says that he, being in the form of God, right, did not consider it robbery to be equal with God, but he humbled himself and took on our nature. And he did that without undergoing any substantial natural change in his being. So he remains fully God, but assumes he takes on our nature. And so that occurs without any alteration of his divinity. Hence why he remains eternally begotten of the Father, even when he steps into time and space. So that's how it's a both and it's not a dialectic. And all Unitarian, anti-Trinitarian, and Muslim arguments, they miss the nature-person distinction, they miss what Chalcedon teaches about the two natures, and they miss that this is a true union that protects the integrity of both of those natures even after the death and even after the resurrection. So that the death of Christ is explained explicitly only to mean that the human soul is severed from the human body, and then that human soul descends into Hades to preach the gospel to the dead. Right? That's the Petrine, the text of Peter, that he went and he preached to the spirits in prison. So as you can see, as John Damascus says very clearly, that the solution to this dilemma or false dilemma is just to read book 3 of On the Orthodox Faith, the last 3 or 4 chapters where he talks about what it means for us as Orthodox when we say that Christ died, and what happened in that death, and what happened when his human soul descended into Hades, and how there was no human subject, but rather the Logos is the only subject, even of that human soul, that descends into Hades. So he's preaching in his human soul, in his human nature, in Hades. And that, the death of Christ, is the key to understanding this and how this goes on, what exactly goes on in the death of Christ. So that's how he is both God and able to undergo death without alteration or change.